Alrighty, folks, it is time for Grand Prix Darkhand, the seemingly at this point annual Revolution Brawl GP here in August 2025. I say seemingly annual because there's been no official confirmation that every August GP will be a Brawl GP, but certainly going off of historical precedent, August has always been the Brawl GP, and certainly this month has not changed that fact. So it is the fourth and final month of the Kitsuo Dusk of Time and Errors in the Weft rotation season. As always, the fourth month in a season brings with it a special variant format. So rather than traditional standard play, we are going to be getting to play Revolution Brawl. And there were some fun small rules changes. Any vehicles can be your commander in this Brawl GP, as has been made the case recently, thanks to Edge of Eternities in official Magic. But we also have Ruins as another artifact type and also land type that is legendary and comes with a stat line, so those have also been made eligible to be your commander. However, we're not really using any of those rules here, so there's really no big rules changes that we're taking advantage of here. Now, normally, when it comes to a GP, I'll usually try and do some degree of prep beforehand, where I try and brace myself to get a feel on like what I think is really good in the field, and then either bring something that I think is really going to succeed on its own merits, or something that I think is going to be good against the things that I think are going to really thrive. This time, I'm not doing either of those things. I had a couple decks I was tinkering around with and brewing around with. I had one that I think, if I could push it to its limits, and I'll actually just pull it up now. I think if I was invested in trying to push a deck to its absolute limits, I would be bringing Codename Spider. I have playtested a lot of this deck against one of the two decks that I know people are particularly afraid of, and I do think Codename Spider is really good into the field. I think you can build Spider in such a way that you can have a very like creature-centric mid-range strategy with a lot of just good sustain through a couple different mill engines that just keep you drawing cards after turn after turn after turn. But the problem I have with Codename Spider is that the games go very long. I played exactly one league match with this deck. We had to go to game 3. It was a 2-hour affair, and I thought, I have too much respect for my audience to put you all through 2-hour matches, and I have too much respect for myself to melt my brain like that. So we have settled on a black deck. We've settled on a different color besides blue or white, though. We're playing Jack Monster Mentor. I like graveyard decks. I like graveyard value nonsense. And really, my rationale with bringing Jack is not so much, I think this deck's going to be really good against the field, although we'll get into how I think it could stack up against some of the other decks that are being anticipated as being brought. The big reason I brought Jack is the same reason I build most commander decks. So pulling back a little bit from Revolution and from custom Magic in general, a lot of my official Magic the Gathering experience is with the commander format. I want to say like 6 decks built in paper right now, although the count usually fluctuates very rapidly. And a lot of why the count fluctuates rapidly is I often find myself building and dismantling my commander decks to try and hone in on things that I really deeply enjoy, and that I enjoy in such a way as to where I feel like they're not going to just sort of eradicate fun for everybody else at the table. And that's because Commander is a very social format. It's a multiplayer format. Brawl is going to have some very different restrictions in that regard. But when I approach deck building in Brawl, I often approach it sort of as this like happy middle ground between the like self-expression that I seek in Commander and the more competitive 1v1 resource trading that you might expect in a typical standard deck. So with that in mind, we've got some pretty good, cheap interactive tools, but we've also just got some like goofy graveyard value. I think this deck is probably as lean as I could get it. There's definitely some things that are probably going to underperform, and I'm okay with that. I think I'm not going into this GP thinking, oh, I have to make top cut, I have to try and win. If I win, I would love that. I would love to make my standings going into World Championships next April a little bit better, but it's not the end all be all for me this month. This month, my goal is just to have fun and play cards that I think are cool. And we're going to get to play some more competitively bent cards in the sort of wake of playing some cards that are cool. So, of course, the first big question would be, why am I not playing a Theros Age of Trax commander? Because this is the last month for Theros Age of Trax. What a good time to give a send-off to, like, Skotha, Titan of Eternal Dark. Beyond the fact that I am kind of just running this begrudgingly, and it's not the only card I'm running begrudgingly. I'm sure you see my mortal nemesis over in the sorceries pile, and we'll get there. Skotha, not even necessarily begrudgingly. I think this card is really cool and really good where it's landed since its nerfs. It's far less problematic than untapping all of your lands. But Skotha, I think, while Skotha makes for a very strong Brawl commander, I wanted to avoid something too high up on the curve just because I know things are likely to skew a little bit more towards the aggressive side. And in terms of people playing very high aggression strategies, a 6-mana commander can feel really clunky. So I wanted to lean towards something lower on the curve. 4-drop I felt was really nice because that just gives me a lot of options to play it on turn 3 with different mana dorks and like different ways of accelerating mana that I can develop on turns 1 and 2. Beyond that, while I love Theros Age of Trax, and it is going to be sad to see it go, I felt like I wanted to let my commander choice be more about what I felt could work best with the deck I was looking to build, rather than what I felt would be the best homage to the set that is leaving the format next month. So we've got plenty of Theros Age of Trax cards in here, a lot of the old familiars in mono black, but we are going to be leaning on a card from this year in Jack Monster Mentor. So let's talk about Jack and talk about the deck, and then we can talk about how I think this fares against the boogeymen of the format. So Jack is a 2 black and a green planeswalker, starts at 3 loyalty with 2 upticks and 1 smaller downtick. His ultimate, as you might call it, is just his base starting loyalty. So you can cash him in immediately to get his final ability, or as you build up counters on him, you can just use any of his abilities freely and interchangeably. But the most important thing on Jack is his passive. Whenever 1 or more permanent cards are put into graveyards, not just your graveyard, not just your opponent's graveyard, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Important thing to note here is if both players mill cards simultaneously, my understanding is Jack still only triggers once. So something like, for instance, a Laystone of Ruin, which is like end step, each player mills 2 cards. Even if, I and my opponent both mill 2 lands off of Laystone of Ruin, that's only going to be 1 trigger for Jack, so my opponent loses 1, I gain 1. So Jack really wants me to be sort of nickel and diming, lots of value exchanges, lots of resources pushing into my graveyard, into my opponent's graveyard, 1 card at a time. And so with that in mind, Jack really skews me heavily towards playing good interactive removal, good tools to sort of develop my board, and just kind of fighting for resource attrition and then getting to pad my life total, ping my opponent down as we sort of play the attrition game. The 2 upticks that Jack brings to the table are a +2 to just mill 2 cards. That will almost always yield a Jack trigger. All of these abilities will usually yield a Jack trigger. Even Jack's -3, Jack does not say 1 or more other permanent cards, so while Jack won't be in play to see the -3 resolve if you use the -3 immediately, what Jack will be able to do is see himself go to the graveyard. So even when Jack goes to the graveyard, you can ship him back to the command zone as a state-based action, but Jack will still have seen that he went to the graveyard and ping your opponent that way. So it's just sort of a nice like death by 1,000 cuts in that regard. +1 lets us sacrifice a land or discard a land card to be able to play a creature or land card from our graveyard this turn. Jack's +1 can be really nice for letting us rebuy some fetches. We can, pitch cards in our hands to rebuy Forgotten Junkyard if we really just need to, if we don't need the untapped land this turn, if we would rather cycle the lands we have in play over and over and over. I believe this is we play the card, so it's not even necessarily coming into play tapped. So we could discard an ETB tapped land like Temple of Malady to get something that would be untapped like a basic land in our graveyard. It lets us cycle things like Time-Worn Crags. There's a lot of creature lands running around, and creature lands can be pretty tricky to deal with right now. So Time-Worn Crags can sort of help us chip away at our opponent's problematic utility lands in that regard. We can, cycle a Forlorn Path and then get it into play with Jack that way. Just a nice bit of recursion. And then, of course, Jack's +1 also letting us turn extra lands in hand into creatures in our graveyard. So we've got 19 creatures here, and we'll get into those in just a moment. But the creatures are really sort of the core of what we have going on. And then finally, the -3, as mentioned, will kill Jack immediately if used immediately. But Jack will still see himself go to the graveyard for his trigger, and we'll make each player sacrifice a creature, and then we get to return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. So if our board is empty, this just rebuys a creature for us. If we do have a creature we sacrifice, we can rebuy that creature immediately, or we can sacrifice a sort of small incidental creature and pick up something that's far more valuable. Let's talk about the creatures now. The creatures are sort of the star of the show here. We've got 19. Unfortunately, for my view, they're sorted alphabetically and not by mana value, but that's okay because I think I have a good beat on where they are mana value-wise anyways. So we've got 2 1-drops here in Rooftop Slink. Going to be a 1-mana 1/1. When it hits a player, I can have each of us discard a card. So that can be a Jack trigger right there. And can also just be good to sort of deny our opponent resources while acknowledging that our graveyard is going to be a resource engine in and of itself. And then we can Cyber Soul it for 3 and a black, tapping artifacts to pay for colorless or for the generic cost if we want as a sorcery, to transform it into Synthetic Spectre, which makes it a 2/2 flyer that always makes the opponent discard a card and we never have to. And then if their hand is empty, it starts growing in size to become a more dangerous threat. This is one of many promos we're running in the deck. I figured I am prone towards wanting to bling out commander decks that I am liking. So why not throw in some of the promos for cards in this Brawl deck, just for fun. And it's been doing really well for Dr. Chipmunk, who is a big fan of getting to play all of the different promos that are available to her, and she's been doing real well lately. So maybe we'll see how it works for us. Yeah, so the Synthetic Spectre is a really nice threat, and for that to come out of a 1-drop is really nice. It's a card that gets to have some nice sort of mid to late game utility while also just being a really reasonable 1-drop. Tough Nut is the other 1-drop. This is one that I am very excited to get to play in this particular format. It is 1 mana 0/2. You can pay 1 and tap it to add 1 mana of any color, so it can fix your mana for sort of more color intensive costs, kind of alleviating the pressure of having few dual lands for fixing. Like we're on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dual lands and 2 fetches. But like we have a ton of basics. We have a ton of basics. 14 lands that tap for only one of our 2 colors, and then a land that taps for neither color. So Tough Nut can fix our mana in that regard, but it's also just very good because we can tap it for a mana to spend on anything other than spells from our hand. So most notably, and the thing that had a lot of people's eyes on Tough Nut for Brawl, is that your commander is never going to be a spell from your hand, so it casts your commander. And for a while, I was looking at Tough Nut as a way to justify playing a 3-drop commander on turn 2, but with Tough Nut being the only good instance of like a turn 1 ramp, I didn't really want to like hang my entire like GP success on whether or not I could get Tough Nut into a 3-drop reliably. So I decided to go for a 4-drop. Gives me more ramp options to sort of try and get up to the 4-mana commander. And then Tough Nut can be something we play on turn 1 that opens up our turn 2 to be something else while still getting Jack in play on turn 3. Speaking of 2-drops, we got a lot of 2-drops, and we will start, I think, with not a creature here, but we'll talk about one of the 8 non-permanent spells, and this is important to contextualize the 2-drops we're about to discuss. We're on Ozon's Blessing. Tutors, classically, pretty solid in Commander, pretty solid in most Singleton formats because it allows you to functionally have a second copy of whatever creature is most important in that given situation, and then Blessing in particular here gets to be a really strong situational card where it can just find us whatever we need in a particular given situation. And the nice thing about Ozon's Blessing is I could see situations where we might even want to search up Rooftop Slink, depending on where we're at, if we just want to sort of flip into a reasonable aggressive body. So like, even one of our 1-drops can be a reasonable target for Ozon's Blessing. But as far as the 2-drops go, we'll talk about them sort of in their own merits and then how they might interact with Ozon's Blessing. And we'll start with the other couple mana dorks. We have Mana Harvesters. Can tap, add 1 mana of any color for a 1 and a green 1/2, and it untaps once each turn when we cast a multicolored spell. Granted, we don't have a ton of multicolored spells. In fact, I think we only have... like skimming through my deck list here, I think we have 1 multicolored spell other than the commander. So we're not going to use that clause too often, but this is just going to like cast our commander and then untap either to block and defend our commander, or it can just, swing in for 1 if we want it to. So that can be pretty nice. The other mana dork we have here is Concurrent Escapist, another 2 mana 1/2. This one only taps for green, but it can copy itself if it isn't a token when it enters if we control something that costs 3 or more mana. So if we play this after our commander is 4 mana, so that will corrupt Concurrent Escapist and give us 2. Though notably, tokens are not permanent cards, so we would only be able to get value out of the token in terms of being able to tap it for mana. It would not be able to trigger Jack itself. Yeah, either of these mana dorks do the same thing as Tough Nut in just trying to bounce us up to Jack on turn 3. And then both of them can kind of just sort of sit around and play later on, or we can, put them in play and have them as the sack fodder to Jack's -3 while we rebuy more important creatures. Beyond that, we've got a lot of good utility 2-drops. Mask Smith is a pretty great one. A little bit of graveyard hate, artifact hate, enchantment hate. Good to just have ways to pick off problem permanents. And with Ozon's Blessing being able to find this, that makes Ozon's Blessing just a 4-mana removal spell or pinpoint graveyard hate if needed. There's also Pressuring Ghoul. Just a nice aggressive 2-drop, can sort of chip away at the opponent's hand as we get landfall triggers. And of course with Jack, as mentioned, we can sort of use Jack to cycle fetches like Forgotten Junkyard or Redeveloped Cityscape. Or sorry, I have 3 fetches. Or Primal Fisher. I counted Forgotten Junkyard, I think, as one of the 7 duels. I only have 6 duels. So like we can cycle one of our 3 fetches with Jack to get more landfall triggers to trigger Pressuring Ghoul and sort of amp up the amount of pressure we're applying with the Pressuring Ghoul. Which can be really nice. And of course, it puts our opponent in a really awkward bind of having to decide whether their life total is more valuable than the cards in their hand. And if they choose to get rid of the cards in their hand, we still get to do some damage with Jack, so they might as well just let us build up a giant hasty flyer. We also have a little bit more incidental graveyard hate in Lurking Virkalakis. There are a lot of decks that seem to be looking to do some graveyard value, and Virkalakis, though it is but a shadow of its former self, still a pretty good card. It's a 2-mana 2/2. It gets to attack and eat cards in graveyards, and then either scale up or gain lifelink, depending on what kind of card is eaten. And, having graveyard hate is going to be nice. This is not a format where we can just put 3 Soul Guide Lanterns in the sideboard. And while Soul Guide Lantern could be good in this deck, I really wanted to sort of lean more into caring about the board, pushing stuff on the board as much as I can, and letting the things that don't push stuff onto the board be focused on either specifically interacting with what's on the opponent's board or stripping away cards in the opponent's hand. So as a result, Virkalakis is next to Mask Smith as one of our primary pieces of graveyard hate. Beyond that, we have 2 more pieces of hand attack alongside Rooftop Slink in Exorcist of Errors. Just sort of a classic. I say classic, but it's been a classic as of these last 4 months. One of the more iconic cards from Errors in the West that just gets to play a little hand attack game with the opponent. 2 mana 2/3. Opponent gets to split their hand into a face-up and face-down pile, and you can take a non-land card from one of those piles of your choice and just exile it until Exorcist leaves the battlefield. So you can take something important from the face-up pile, and if you really don't care about the face-up pile, you can just pick from the face-down pile, or if you think your opponent's hiding something really important in the face-down pile, you can take it that way. It's a bit of a guessing game, and there's a lot of nice variance there that's all based on skill and sort of navigating options. Exorcist will be a little more awkward in some respects because we can't exactly think, oh, well, what if our opponent has a second copy of this card in the face-down pile? This is is REV Brawl. We have one card that you can run multiple copies of, and it's not been great since it got nerfed. So the nice thing of Exorcist of Errors is in this environment, if we take a card with Exorcist, that card is just fully out of availability for our opponent until they kill the Exorcist. And removal is going to be a bit more scarce and a bit more desirable for the opponent. So if Exorcist can eat a removal spell, that is pretty great in its own right. And of course, with Ozon's Blessing, we can flash this out on our opponent's draw step and just take whatever card they might have drawn for turn, especially if they're low on cards in hand. Similarly, Arduous Miners can accomplish the same thing. Can make us treasures. It's a 2-mana 1/1. When it enters, we can have all players discard a card, very similar to the Rooftop Slink damage trigger. And this one is just going to do the same thing as Slink with Jack of letting us pressure our opponent's hand while getting to fill our own graveyard. And Ozon's Blessing can like slip this out into play, much like Exorcist of Errors on our opponent's draw step to just sort of deny them the draw for the turn. And then as cards leave our graveyard, we can make treasure tokens to sort of bounce up in mana and get to play more cards in a turn sooner into the game. And then the last 2-drop, I believe I've covered. Sorry, there are 2 more 2-drops. There's 2 more. There's Inklight Dancer, sort of getting a removal spell in here without sacrificing permanent count. Card I have been a big fan of since I played it last month. 2-mana 1/3 Human Performer. You can pay a black, sacrifice a creature to have it deal 1 to each opponent, and you gain 1 life. That stacks really well with Jack Monster Mentor to sort of rapid fire the opponent down as we sacrifice our creatures. Gives us a lot of really relevant reach over a longer game or on a stalled board. And then Stroke of Light is an adventure instant attached to it. For 2 mana, just gives a creature -2/-2 until end of turn, and then we exile the Dancer to be able to cast the creature side later on. Dancer I've been really happy with. Ozon's Blessing helps us find Inklight Dancer lethals more reliably. And while this black mana cost is really awkward with 7 forests in our deck and 1 colorless source, again, we do have a couple small things like Tough Nut to be able to help us turn some green mana into black mana when we need it. But yeah, Inklight Dancer going to be nice for that as well. And then finally, Morbid Bloomer. 2 mana 3/1 Fungus with Ward 1, so going to be a little annoying for the opponent to pick off. Really good at blocking or attacking, and then whenever it deals combat damage, not necessarily to a player, we can pay 1 to return another permanent card from our graveyard to our hand. This lets us rebuy relevant creatures, relevant enchantments or artifacts or lands. Even in a pinch, we could use this to rebuy our Planeswalker if we put Jack in the graveyard rather than the command zone. So that can just be a nice bit of consistency and value over time. And then, of course, Bloomer, on an unchecked board, Bloomer just gets to punch for 3 every turn, which starts to add up, especially with all of the other little points of damage we get to chip in over time. So I believe that is properly every 2-drop now. So let's talk about some of the other creatures, not really stacking by mana value because the 1s and 2s are the most important with Ozon's Blessing in mind. I guess I will count out the 3s though, because we do have Skotha, Titan of Eternal Dark, which returns permanents specifically with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. So we'll talk about Skotha more in a second, but we'll talk about the 3s individually as well. Urban Explorer is a 3-mana 2/3. When it enters, we return a permanent card with mana value 1 or less from our graveyard to our hand. We do have a couple 1-drops that we could buy back with this, such as our Rooftop Slink or our Tough Nut, but most often we're going to want to use Urban Explorer to rebuy like a Forlorn Path or a Fetch Land and just kind of get some more land drops out of it. And then as lands enter, it'll get +2/+1 until end of turn. So Urban Explorer can become a pretty relevant threat pretty quickly, especially with fetch lands like Forgotten Junkyard helping to amplify how many land drops we get to have fire off in a turn. So more landfall triggers means more value off of Urban Explorer, much like it was true for Pressuring Ghoul. Outside of Urban Explorers, there is Hardy Rough Rider. 1 green for a 3/3 Human Knight. When it enters or leaves, we gain life equal to the greatest toughness among creatures you control. I just felt like having a bit more sustainability was really nice, really relevant. And we're actually pretty low on 3-drops. This is only 1 of 4. So having another 3-drop on the curve just felt important, and this felt like the right one to sort of give us more survivability. It's joined by Barbarous Rough Rider, the black equivalent, also with 3/3 for 3. And both of these wander for 6 mana, so you can cast them from the battlefield to repeat their enter and leaves trigger. When this one enters or leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 2 life unless they sacrifice a non-token creature. And because they're sacrificing non-token creatures, there'll be permanent cards for Jack to see it and ping them for 1 and gain us 1 if they do choose to sacrifice. So either way, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And then finally, Alronton Visionary is our final mana dork in the creature slot. 3 mana 2/2, taps for 1 mana of any color, also wanders for 6, and when it enters, we flip the top 3 cards of our library, can put a non-creature permanent card from among them into our hand, and the rest into our graveyard. So as I mentioned, we got 19 creatures, but we also have 23 lands, 7 enchantments, and 2 artifacts. That is 32 potential hits off of Alronton Visionary. Not the most astounding in the world, but also still pretty fine if we just hit a land off of Alronton Visionary. And even if we don't, even if we just mill like 2 creatures and an instant, that's still going to be a Jack trigger that we can repeatedly get by wandering the Visionary if we absolutely have to. So those are the 3 drops that Skotha can bring back. Now we'll just sort of talk about the sort of extras. Starting with Skotha, as mentioned, fallen from grace a bit, used to untap your lands and just give you so much mana to work with, but Skotha just still does some pretty impactful things. 6 mana 6/6, when he enters or attacks, each opponent discards a card, so that's going to be a Jack trigger, and then we may return a permanent card with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. That is going to make it so we can rebuy not only our 1 to 3 mana creatures, not only rebuy fetch lands, but also rebuy any enchantments or artifacts that we might lose. And every single artifact and enchantment in our deck is less than 4 mana. So every single artifact and enchantment in our deck is eligible to be brought back with Skotha if need be. And Skotha is not targeting the card in our graveyard, which means our opponent has to either pinpoint remove what we might get back in advance of Skotha's trigger resolving, or they have to just nuke our entire graveyard to deny us the choice altogether. And if Skotha dies or gets milled or puts into the graveyard by any sort of source, we can pay black, black, green, green as a sorcery to return Skotha from the graveyard to the battlefield and then put him on the bottom of our library. So this gives us a little bit of anti-mill value, though we of course can't do this on our upkeep, so if we start the turn with an empty deck, we are kind of SOL. But otherwise, Skotha does give us a nice bit of padding on our deck while getting to build more attrition over time. So that is Skotha. We also have Malicious Skycleaver as our other 6-drop. And I don't believe we have any 5-drops. So I think it's these 2 6-drops, and then we have a pair of 4-drops. Malicious Skycleaver is our other Cyber Soul creature, though again, we don't have many artifacts. We'll have the treasures from Arduous Miners, and that's pretty much the most artifact generation we have. But that's fine, because we'll just be able to get to some big mana turns if the game starts to go long. So Skycleaver is a 6 mana 4/4 with flying. When it enters, we pay any amount of life to deal that much damage to each other creature. In absolute worst case scenario, we pay 0 life to deal 0, and it's just a 6 mana 4/4 flyer. But oftentimes this will just be a Toxic Deluge on a body. Buy us some time, and Brawl starts out at 25 life instead of 20, so we do have a little bit more life to work with, and things like Hardy Rough Riders and Jack will help us pad our life total to make this a less painful equation. And if we can ever flip it for its Cyber Soul cost of 7 black, we get a 7/7 flying trampling lifelinker with ward pay 7 life, which is a stellar deal in terms of its ability to completely and utterly clock the opponent out of the game quickly, while making sure our opponent is going to be utterly incapable of ever killing us, which is really nice. There's also 2 4-drops. We've got Innering's Pupil. 4 mana 3/3. Whenever it enters or attacks, target player discards a card. If they can't, they sacrifice a creature. If they can't do that, they lose 7 life. So this is either going to be, opponent discards a card, possibly a permanent card to trigger Jack, or they sacrifice a creature, probably non-token, so it triggers Jack, or they just lose 7 life, and then we don't need a Jack trigger. We're doming them for 7. Really nice attrition card, especially when backed up by all of the other attrition elements we have. And then we have a sneaky, kind of infinite combo. Life Hacker is a 4 mana 4/4 with lifelink and level up for 1 mana and pay 4 life, which again we're going to get a little bit more advantage out of thanks to that 25 starting life total. And the fact that it has lifelink, so it'll kind of make up for the level up cost over time. At levels 1 through 4, it is a 5/5 life linker with whenever you gain life, draw a card. And at level 5 and beyond, it's a 6/6 with lifelink, and whenever you gain life, draw that many cards. Now, the infinite in question is something I did not intend, but noticed as I was running through this. It's part of why I talked about this after the Inner Rings people, because I felt like, of all the creatures, this might be the thing warranting the most discussion. The infinite requires us to have 8 or more cards in hand. If so, and we have Life Hacker at 1 or more level counters and Jack in play, we discard a permanent card to hand size. That triggers Jack to make opponent lose 1 life, and we gain 1 life. When we gain the life, Life Hacker will force us to draw a card, putting us back up to a full hand. Which means, with us only having 8 non-permanent cards in our deck, there is a very high likelihood that if we have more cards in our deck than our opponent has life, Life Hacker at 1 level counter or more, plus Jack, and discarding the hand size, wins us the game on the spot. Because it just drains our opponent card after card after card as we discard cards and draw cards and discard cards and draw cards, thanks to Life Hacker and Jack and the end step. So maximum hand size can be a weapon, and we'll see if that gets to come up in this particular context. Outside of the creatures, let's talk about artifacts and enchantments real quick. Then we'll talk about the dreaded 8 non-permanent cards. Artifacts we only have 2 of. I did kind of think about trying to squeeze more in because we have the 2 Cyber Soul creatures, but ultimately I just went for the ones that felt like they were the most relevant, and that meant nothing like Ley Shard, where it was just, a little bit of mana acceleration and a card draw. While Ley Shard does get us to Jack on turn 3, I felt like having the board presence was the more important component of our ramp targets, because something like Escapist or Mana Harvesters is a body on board we can sacrifice to Jack's -3 to get a trigger out of Jack while rebuying creatures from our graveyard. And that's just not true of the Ley Shard. So Root Fossil is our first option. It's a 1 mana artifact. We can pay 2 and sacrifice it to Surveil 3, and then we may put a land card surveilled this way from our graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. Notably, Tough Nut on turn 1 means that if we play Root Fossil on turn 2, Tough Nut's mana from its second ability can be used to activate abilities. So we can pay Root Fossil's 2 mana sacrifice cost on turn 2, even if it's not the turn 1 play, so long as we started on Tough Nut. From there, Root Fossil can be surfaced for 2 and a green, and surfaces transformed. So if we have 6 or more other cards in our graveyard, we can cast it as a 2/4 plant creature with that sacrifice ability on attack. So it's another Surveil 3. We put a land surveilled this way from our graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. That does it every time it attacks. Reborn Lily notably surfaces as a token copy, so if the Lily dies, that does not trigger Jack, but Root Fossil itself will trigger Jack if we sacrifice it after Jack comes into play. And there can be value to either getting the Lily in play and just attacking with it. That triggers Jack if we surveil over a permanent. And then, of course, there can be value to just never surfacing the Root Fossil and using it in conjunction with Scotha or Urban Explorer to just keep getting the sacrifice ability on the front side. The other artifact we have is something kind of like Inklight Dancer to sort of amplify the amount we can clock our opponents over time. Aspect of the End. Double black for a 2/2 Ruin with Death Touch and Spell Charge 3. So at the start of combat on our turn, if we've spent at least 3 mana to cast spells this turn, we can have it become an artifact creature until end of turn. And if an opponent would lose life, they lose that much life plus 1 instead. So Jack triggers are going to deal 2 to the opponent. Inklight Dancer is going to deal 2 to the opponent. Anything we have that's going to chip away at the opponent does a little bit more over time, and that kind of helps add on to our game plan of just sort of pressuring our opponent out of the game 1 trigger at a time. Enchantments, we have a lot of 2-mana enchantments, a lot of black enchantments. We'll start with the single green enchantment we have, which is Disestablishmentarianism. Much like with Masksmith, I felt like having some things that could check artifacts and enchantments felt particularly nice. And ultimately, a lot of our artifacts and enchantments that have activated abilities, the activated abilities aren't actually the biggest deals with them. There's certainly a lot of value to be had with a lot of the activated abilities we do have on our artifacts and enchantments, but for the most part, the big appeal to them is just that they do a thing when they enter, or they do a little small thing on our turn, or every once in a while on our turn. And so Disestablishmentarianism doesn't actually shut down too much of what we have going on, while being an artifact or enchantment removal tool that triggers Jack when it goes to the graveyard, can be rebought with Skotha or Morbid Bloomer, exiles things. So, of course, the sacrifice ability won't cause their card to go to their graveyard for Jack to trigger, but also means that if we get rid of something with graveyard recursion value, that's denied for the opponent, and can get around a bit of fringe indestructibility if it pops up here and there as well. So Disestablishmentarianism, actually pretty nice in that regard. Just sort of another little removal spell on a permanent. We also have Omen of Slaughter as an edict effect. 2-mana flash enchantment, going to make each opponent sacrifice a creature or planeswalker. We can pay 2 and a black, sacrifice it to scry 2. Again, Disestablishmentarianism shutting that down is not the biggest deal. Same with Finax's Touch. 1 mana to make the opponent discard a card and lose 1 life. And then we can pay 2, sack it to draw a card and lose 1 life. Both of these halves will potentially trigger Jack. If the opponent discards a permanent card, they actually lose 2 and we gain 1. If we crack Finax's Touch with Jack in play, we actually gain the life we lose back, and the opponent's losing 1 instead. So just nice all around. Our first big removal spell is Pult of Tizerus. We've got a lot of little black enchantments that are going to sit around building up devotion, a lot of early black creatures that build up devotion. So this being -X/-X, where X is our devotion to black, for a single mana, just lets us pick off a lot of creatures early on in the game while still having some ability to use this against larger creatures as the game goes on. We also have Receive, our one subroutine in the deck for a single mana. As the centers, we get to insert it into one of our 3 programs, and then the next program runs all its subroutines at our main phase when Sagas would run. This runs to surveil us for 2. Can be good to sort of funnel things into our graveyard, sort of fine-tune our draws on future turns, and then we can pay 2 life and crack it to draw 2 cards. And much like with Finax's Touch, Jack recovers some of the health we spend on Receive. We also have another life gain tool alongside Hardy Rough Rider in Sifting Through Soot. This is a 2-mana landfall enchantment. Much like with Urban Explorer and Pressure and Ghoul, we can hope to get a lot of landfall triggers thanks to Jack letting us rebuy fetch lands. And whenever we do have a land enter, we'll gain 2 life and put a Soot counter on Sifting Through Soot. We can pay a black and remove 2 Soot counters from it to make target player lose 2 life, just give us a little bit more reach. Another nice thing with Aspect of the End as well, because that just becomes a bolt every 2 Soot counters we spend. And then we can pay 4 mana and remove 5 Soot counters as a sorcery, while sacrificing Sifting Through Soot to just reanimate an artifact or creature card from our graveyard, which could be pretty nice. And then, of course, we have Skotha and Morbid Bloomer to rebuy the Sifting Through Soot. So we could even use Sifting Through Soot, remove 5 Soot counters, sacrifice it, reanimate Skotha. Skotha gets back Sifting Through Soot, and so it's like we just didn't have to sacrifice it at all. And then finally, our 1/3 mana enchantment, the Path of Finax. It's its final month in the format. Why would we not play it? 3 mana Saga. Each opponent discards 2 cards and mills 2 cards on the first chapter. They lose 2 life and we gain 2 life on the second. And then on the third chapter, if they have 8 or more cards in their graveyard, we exile a card from their graveyard and may cast cards exiled this way this turn, with mana of any type to spend to cast those spells. So Path of Finax can be a nice sort of repeatable engine to just strip our opponent's hand, pad our life total, irritate them, and use their resources against them. So finally, let's talk about the instants and sorceries. We talked about Ozan's Blessing already. Again, this is just going to be nice to get some sort of flexible utility value. We can hand attack our opponent on their upkeep, on their draw step. We can go find Masksmith to pick something out of play. We can go find Morbid Bloomer if we just need recursion. Lots of fun, flexible options. We have some more removal. We have Hang. It's going to pick off a creature with power 3 or less for 2 mana, or if we control a permanent with greater mana value than this spell. And as mentioned, Jack is 4 mana, so Jack is going to be able to corrupt Hang if we have Jack in play. Downlink Overload, 1 mana, -2/-2 instant. Its controller mills 2 cards, so we can kill an opposing creature and then ping with Jack. And then ping again with the controller milling 2 cards. So the way that Downlink Overload works with Jack, and this is actually relevant with Pull of Tizers as well, is that because state-based actions check individually, Jack will trigger separately for both instances. So in the case of Downlink Overload, the opponent mills 2 cards and their creature gets -2/-2, but the creature doesn't die as Downlink Overload resolves, so Jack will see the 2 cards milled and put a trigger on the stack then. Then, once Jack's trigger is on the stack, state-based actions will check, the creature will see it has no toughness and be put into the graveyard, dying. That will trigger Jack a second time. Similarly, Pull of Tizerus puts a creature's toughness to 0 or below, the creature dies state-based actions, Jack triggers, Pull of Tizerus is still in play until after Jack's trigger is put on the stack, then a second Jack trigger is put on the stack when Pull of Tizerus is put into the graveyard by a second round of state-based actions. So both of these 1 mana removal spells put 2 Jack triggers on the stack, which is really nice. And then our last instant is All That Remains, 2 and a black instant. Look at the top 3 cards of our library, 1 into hand, rest into graveyard. We can flash it back for a single black mana by discarding a card. Can be nice to sort of put irrelevant things in our important things from our graveyard, from our hand into our graveyard rather, while giving us some decent card selection, which is going to be pretty important because a lot of our things are not focused on card draw so much as they are hand attack on our opponents or just developing the board. And then finally, our sorceries. We have 2 1-mana sorceries. We have Duress. It's just going to be one of our only hand attack tools in terms of targeted hand attack. Much like Exorcist, we just get to peek at the opponent's hand full sail, pick away a non-creature, non-land card. This is a classic standard staple of yesteryear, and of course it is legal in current official standard as well, so if you know anything about Magic, you probably know Duress is a very good card, and there's going to be plenty of non-creature, non-land cards running around in this format, I feel. So Duress will have some pretty valid hits a lot of the time. And then Harvest Time is how we're getting away with 23 lands. I was a little worried to run less than 24, but Harvest Time in a lot of cases is just going to kind of be the occasional paying 1 mana for a land drop. But this also gets a land card from our graveyard or library. So if we mill a basic land, we can Harvest Time to get that basic land back out of our graveyard without having to thin our library of lands if we don't want to. And we can also surface it for a single green mana. So again, if there are 6 or more other cards in our graveyard, we can cast it from the graveyard and then exile it as it resolves. Or sorry, exile it and then cast a copy rather. But it gives us essentially 2 instances of pay a single green, go find a land drop, which is really nice to sort of weave in with our other plays on given turns. It's really easy to find a turn where we just have 1 excess green mana that Harvest Time can kind of neatly clean up and sort of fill in the gaps while giving us land drops for future turns. We also have Failed Gateway. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn for 1 black, but if it's corrupted, if we have a 4-drop or greater, which Jack's a 4-drop, instead only creatures the opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. In my playtesting and a lot of what I've seen of the format right now, there are a lot of smaller creatures running around, a lot of like sort of cheap, annoying, aggressive creatures and value creatures. And Failed Gateway is just sort of my way to answer all of that, get a board wipe without having too many board wipes in the format in these colors. It was just sort of the thing I reached for as a way to check the really, really, really aggressive decks. And similarly, we end on my beloathed Chronicle of Extinction. I know I'm still complaining about it, even with the performance I had with it last month. yeah, this card's really good. The flashback mode's really good. 4 mana to choose one mode, but if you flashed it back for 7 black, you can choose any 3 modes and choose them in any combination. So you can do all 3 as one mode, do all 3 modes once, do one mode twice and another once, and just not do the third. I had this in my Codename Spider deck that I mentioned earlier, and I got to do a very particularly weird turn where I had not a whole lot of value in hand, and the opponent had some really important stuff in play that they wanted to have die. Their commander was locked down by an enchantment, and I didn't want to free it up for them. So I had to choose like -2/-2, I think, to mop up some of the smaller creatures that were in play, and then hand attack twice to exile their graveyard. It was very strange. But I got the job done. And then finally, basic land base. We have 7 forests, 6 swamps. The reason we have 1 fewer swamp is both because Harvest Time is pretty important, and so is Tough Nut. Those are probably our more important turn 1 plays compared to Rooftop Slink as the only black 1-drop I'm really rushing to get into play turn 1. Receive can be nice to get into play turn 1, but it's not as critical as Rooftop Slink would be. And then Root Fossil just requires mana of any color, so it's to put it into play, so it's not that big of a deal. So the forests are a little more important because Harvest Time and Tough Nut are how we can get more mana to have more plays in future turns. And the 7th swamp is also still in the deck in the form of Hollowed Chamber, which will be untapped if we have a forest in play, or a basic non-swamp land of any other type if we somehow steal it from our opponent. Not that we really have a way to do so in this deck, but just hypothetically. We can pay it. We can pay 1 and tap and sacrifice it to create 2 treasures, which can be all right with Jack rebuying lands from our graveyard as well. Just sort of cash this in for a bit of banked mana and then replay it with Jack, so we don't actually go down the land drop. We just give up our land drop for the turn. We have 3 fetch lands, as mentioned. Forgotten Junkyard's really good to get back because it will never come into play tapped. It just sacrifices like even if it comes into play tapped, it sacrifices immediately to go find a basic swamp or forest. So with 13 fetchable lands, that's really nice to just sort of pull them out of the deck. And then if it ends up in our hand, we can pay 6 and discard it to rebuy a creature and enchantment from our graveyard to our hand. And obviously we have a lot of impactful creatures and enchantments. We also have Primal Fisher as just sort of the classic fast fetch at this point. ETB tapped unless we control 2 or fewer other lands, and then just cracks for an untapped basic. And then Redeveloped Cityscape, which cracks for a basic into play tapped. Then we can exile a land card from our hand to go find another basic to our hand if needed. So if we're really flooding out on one particular color, we end up with a lot of forests or a lot of swamps, we can use Redeveloped Cityscape to cycle one of the lands in our hand into the land of the other type. Or we could even just sort of crack Cityscape and thin our deck by pitching a forest to go find another forest from our deck, if we're really just that incentivized on not drawing more lands. Beyond that, we got a couple duels. We have Profane Grove, which will usually be shocking in to have it untapped. Temple of Malady will always be tapped, but gives us a bit of top deck manipulation. Forlorn Path comes in tapped after turn 2, but we can cycle it later in the game. And Miasmic Cove. I only have 5 duels, actually. I was counting Hollow Chamber as well. Miasmic Cove is a nice creature land, can be a Death Toucher in our mana base, just sort of mess with our opponent, and if it ever gets picked off, Jack can rebuy it. Urban Explorer, Morbid Bloomer, Skotha all rebuy it. So Miasmic Cove is a little resilient in that regard. Temple of Origins as a bit of fast fixing. Same clause as Primal Fisher, comes in untapped if we have it as our first, second, or third land drop. Lets us choose 2 colors and tap for mana of one of the chosen colors. And then if we would add mana that isn't one of our chosen colors, it adds colorless instead. So if we ever have like a blue, red, or white card that we want to play, we can't make blue, red, or white mana. But that's fine. We're almost never going to have to. So it's not that big of a deal. And then Time-Worn Crags is, as mentioned earlier, really good with all of our land looping stuff as well. So that very long deck tech is everything to do with Jack, Monster, Mentor. Now, brief mention of the 2 decks that I know people are most worried about going into this field. A lot of people talked a lot about Ephemia of the Horse, mono red aggro. It's the best 1-drop in red aggro right now, and you can have it in your starting hand every game. and have it on turn 1 every game because it's going to be in your command zone. That can be really good. It's part of why we are on these 1 mana removal spells like Pull of Tizerus and Downlink Overload, part of why I wanted to go on enough life gain stuff like Sifting Through Soot and Hardy Rough Rider. Jack can kind of incidentally pad our life total in the face of Ephemia as well. Failed Gateway can be really good to mop up the Ephemia boards, though they will have occasionally some higher end things to cause us a bit of trouble. And then Fenax Brazen Thief is the other big one. We're a graveyard deck, so Fenax being able to pressure us for our graveyard can be really relevant. Fenax is kind of a mid-rangey mill deck. So we get to use Jack to sort of flip their mill plan against them. Now, granted, their end step trigger is going to be really good if they flip Fenax Poison Tongued. It's end step we mill X, where X is the number of cards put into our graveyard from anywhere this turn, and they gain life equal to the number of cards milled this way. So we only get 1 Jack trigger, whereas they get a bunch of life. So they're going to gain a lot more life than we get out of Jack triggers. So we're going to have to be a lot more conscientious of not just funneling things to our graveyard in the Finax matchups. But I do still think that our opponent's graveyard plan, mill plan, fueling our strategy can be really good for us. And of course, Fenax being an indestructible enchantment god doesn't really matter when we are packing Masksmith and Disestablishmentarianism along with ways to get them back. So hopefully Fenax and Ephemia won't be too much trouble, but we'll see if we even have to worry about it as we get into the matches. As of recording all of this, the decklist stream has not occurred, so obviously now that you're here at the end of the video, the decklist stream has already happened. I know the pairing for round 1 now that you're watching this, but as a recording, I don't. So I'm curious to see who I'm paired up against in round 1. I'm excited to see what everyone else decided to bring into the field. And yeah, I can't wait to dive into Brawl and finally get to play Revolution Brawl for myself. So if you are excited about the deck tech, be sure to tune in for the GP matches coming down the pike. Make sure to subscribe, hit notifications on, so that way you can be notified when the videos go up as I play through my matches this month. And also stay tuned because we're closing in on the halfway point of the month, and that means we're likely going to be getting the announcement very soon on the next set to come into the Revolution custom standard format. Rotation's right around the corner. I can't wait to find out what the next set's going to be. I can't wait to see what the decks in the field are going to be. There's a lot of excitement this month, and I am so excited to share my excitement with all of you. So thank you all for watching this particularly lengthy deck tech. And I hope you all enjoy us getting to do some pretty monstrous shenanigans. Until then, I will see you all in the Revolution chat. Take care, everyone.